Ivermectin, 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 a dewormer. Really?
They are shaming themselves. No one has to shame them. They're shaming themselves.
No, they need to be
by doing
shamed.
that. Yeah.
They need to be called out and shamed.
Yeah.
I am taking a, what do they call it? Like a regular dose, you know, whatever. They're trying to build up of ivermectin. Ivermectin was a boogeyman early on in COVID.
You couldn't talk about it.
That was wrong. We were given bad information about ivermectin.
Well, Deputy Speaker, after Australia's Dr. Wagstaff's discovery, Australia's internationally renowned Professor Barodi, I said internationally renowned, he was a physician with four...
Order.
You've got to be kidding.
Point of order.
You've got to be kidding. You seriously got to be kidding.
Order. Deputy Speaker, it is essential to the dignity of the House that we debate the matters before us. The second reading amendment is narrow in its focus on the industry aspects of the pandemic. It doesn't allow the member to speak about ivermectin, a drug which the Therapeutic Goods Administration has asked Australians not to use and suggested that it not be imported for the purposes of dealing with COVID. Questions such as these are clearly outside the issues that are before the House.
I think the appropriate action is to request that the member be relevant.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Just on the relevance rule, let's be very clear what this amendment says. Condemns the coalition government for its continued failure to back Australian industry and innovation and to deal with the challenges arising from the pandemic. That is exactly what I am speaking about. You come into this chamber and want to silence debate on one of the most important issues ever facing our country? Shame on you down there at the desk, member for Fenner or wherever you're from. It is absolutely crystal clear that what I am debating is directly relevant to this bill. And how dare you stand up and try and silence debate in the House because of some ideological view that you may have.
The important thing to realize is that North American science spent 15 years figuring out what to do with the next COVID. It was back 2002, 2003, the original SARS-CoV-1 occurred. And so all sorts of experiments went on to determine what would be a useful response were something similar to occur. And the research was done. Research was all done by 2015, 2016. And DARPA, D-A-R-P-A, the American research arm of the U.S. military, it specifically knew and specifically recommended and passed the information on to the CDC that ivermectin in particular was the absolute #1 product to be used in the event of a coronavirus pandemic. It was fully known that ivermectin, and certainly hydroxychloroquine as well, were highly antiviral and immune modulatory.
Any studies, anything that says ivermectin defeats COVID or prevents it from occurring?
There's about 6 studies now all supporting the use of ivermectin. So it reduces new cases of COVID, reduces the risk of hospitalization and death due to COVID. It worked through a range of illness. One of the best cited studies is the ICON trial, which was done in Florida, 4 hospitals in Florida. Ivermectin given in the hospital reduced mortality by 50%. Reduced mortality by 50%. This was published in one of the best pulmonary journals. A tragedy was that the hospitals denied patients ivermectin.
Before.
So it was the first time in history that we ever saw a doctor who could be prosecuted for using a generic, safe, and effective drug for the application that doctor thought was appropriate.
My group of 5, the core 5 of us ICU doctors, collectively were some of the most highly published doctors in the history of critical care medicine. Paul Marek is the most published practicing intensivist in the world.
As we sit here today, I'm the most published person in my field in history.
To this because, I mean, you're the only person saying this. We've got to listen to our doctors and our scientists.
So ivermectin is a drug which has been
dispensed 3.7 billion times. It's changed the face of parasitic diseases on this planet. It's probably the second most important drug ever invented. It is very safe, it's very cheap, and it's highly effective against SARS-CoV-2.
We've got
No,
to listen
I'm not.
to our
That's
doctors
incorrect.
and our scientists.
And it's highly effective against SARS-CoV-2.
I don't
have
even
any
want to get
theories.
into this because,
Well,
I mean, you're the
you-
only person saying this. We've got
No,
to
I'm
listen
not.
to our
That's
doctors
incorrect.
and our scientists.
I am a physician and a man of science. I have done nothing but commit myself to scientific truth and the care of patients. Many that I want to talk about. And I want to talk about that we have a solution to this crisis. There is a drug that is proving to be of miraculous impact. And when I say miracle, I do not use that term lightly. And I don't want to be sensationalized when I say that. That is a scientific recommendation based on mountains of data that has emerged in the last 3 months. Mountains of data have emerged from many centers and countries around the world showing the miraculous effectiveness of ivermectin. It basically obliterates transmission of this virus.
We've got to
No, I'm
listen
not.
to our
That's
doctors
incorrect.
and our scientists.
No other doctor wanted to come into the unit, to the point that I worked 715 continuous days without a single day off. I couldn't get sick. I couldn't take a day off because nobody wanted to care for these people. Because these were, like I said, indigent people, people that had no papers.
And I'll just mention indigent because I think that's a term a lot of people don't know. These are people that could be on the street, people who are in really rough time in their life.
Correct.
Right?
I mean, these
Yeah.
are people that have no resources. And remember, by the time they came to me, they were very sick. So by the time they came to me, they were literally critically ill. These were people that were the sickest of the sick that you can imagine.
And you managed to save a lot of lives.
I did my very best to save a lot of lives with what I had. And we were working on a variety of different guidelines and protocols to be able to help these people. So we started doing that. And our success was unreal. I mean, we started using the MATH Plus protocol, using cortisone-like agents, vitamin C, repurposed drugs like ivermectin. And my mortality data show that my patients in my hospital had a mortality of about 4.4%, when the rest of the country was in the 25 to 40%.
What you said there is incorrect. If you only pick up today's papers, the Sydney Morning Herald, Australia's most senior immunologist, Emeritus Professor Robert Clancy, someone that was actually awarded an Order of Australia for his services to immunology and medicine. He has said, and I quote, Craig Kelly is absolutely right. Now, that's our most senior immunologist. So the idea that I completely and utterly reject the idea that I'm out there putting any theories forward. I'm not putting any theories forward at all. Now, yes, some of the studies that I've posted are still undergoing peer review, but many of them have actually been through the peer review process. In fact, I would say the majority of the studies that I've posted have been through the peer review process. And
Look,
just because
I'm
something
sorry,
is
that
yet
is
to be...
just not true, Craig. I
Well,
mean,
it
one
is.
of the
I'm sorry,
studies
I'm
you
sorry, it's
quote,
incorrect.
it's a
That's right.
Bangladeshi plastic surgeon. I would like to take my medical advice from someone who is knowledgeable in infectious diseases, is an epidemiologist.
Well, that's right. Well, you should
It's
listen
one
in that
example
case. In
of
that
many
case, you should
theories
listen to Professor Robert Clancy. He's our most senior credentialed immunologist in this country. So that's who I believe we should be listening to.
Look,
and he has said, and I'll quote exactly what he's wrote.
You've already quoted it, Craig.
Well, no, I haven't. He also said here, this is very important. He said, from uncertain beginnings, an impressive database has more recently been accumulated that strongly supports the use of hydroxychloroquine and or ivermectin. Their use in concert with the vaccine, so this is not an anti-vax position, their use in concert with the vaccines can no longer be denied. In fact, this is the only science-based opinion. Now, they're not my words. That's not my words. That's not my
study
theories.
you're referring to. That study you're referring to, because this is important.
To any study. You are misrepresenting what I'm saying.
I did my research, Craig, as you asked us to do. You need to listen for a moment.
But hang on,
Ivermectin is a wonderful drug. You are right. If you have scabies or river blindness.
You obviously haven't read. I'm sorry, you are not listening to our. You've got to listen to the science. You've got to listen to.
Are you a scientist? Are you a scientist, Craig? I'm not.
I am.
I'm not.
I have just quoted the senior immunologist in this country, the most highest credentialed immunologist in this country. Now, are you saying that he's wrong?
Really exciting work has come out in the last few months about how ivermectin works. And there's a complete re-look now at ivermectin, about time I may add, but and I think one of the things that's bridged from the narrative that was very unkind to ivermectin and the reality of science is the demonstration by a combination French and American groups showing that ivermectin blocks spike protein. So it blocks the spike protein getting into the cell, and it blocks it aggregating red cells, which is the reason that you get low oxygen saturation in patients who get significant COVID. I was on one of the 3 papers that showed that it was amazing. Within 24 hours of taking ivermectin, oxygen desaturation reversed. Now, that's not suppressing inflammation. And now, by virtue of these studies, it's shown that you disaggregate the cells, and so the oxygen can return very quickly.
For the first time in my entire career, I could not be a doctor. I had to stand by idly. I had to stand by idly watching these people die.
From the FDA, Emergency Use Authorization of Medical Products and Related Authorities. For the FDA to issue an emergency use authorization, there must be no adequate, approved, and available alternative to the candidate product for diagnosing, preventing, or treating the disease or condition. If ivermectin were an effective treatment, the vaccines never would have gotten emergency use authorization in the US.
If a viable therapeutic strategy existed for outpatients, then the logic supporting universal vaccination with largely experimental products is no longer supportable.
But I'm going to try to make this personal. My name is Karen DeVore. I have been practicing dermatology in Spartanburg, South Carolina for over 30 years. I was noticing that my long-term patients on hydroxychloroquine for autoimmune diseases like lupus, they were not getting COVID in 2020. So I began writing ivermectin for COVID-19 patients almost immediately. To my knowledge, not a single patient that I treated with ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine was hospitalized or died from COVID. Not only were there 0 side effects, patients amazed me. They called me back. They told me how overnight they felt normal again. Within 8 hours, their fever was broken, their rigors were gone. It was unbelievable. If I had not been witnessing such impressive clinical results, I don't think I would have continued to fight for my patients with the insurance companies and the pharmacies. Why would you deny this for anyone? So why wouldn't you try writing these drugs? Why wouldn't you do vitamin D and zinc? What did you have to lose? And really, ironically, somebody already alluded to this, South Carolina is a right to try state. But because these drugs were already FDA approved for human use, even a terminally ill patient on a ventilator at the end of life was not allowed to try these drugs. How many lives could have been saved? How many lives could have been saved?
For the first time in my entire career, I could not be a doctor. I had to stand by idly. I had to stand by idly watching these people die.
How many lives could have been saved?